welcome back to the channel, guys. This is the part 2 for the IWI Masada, where we talk about all of the things the YouTube censors don't want you to say, like optics on pistols and field stripping and reassembling and anything that resembles assembling a firearm. So that's going to be what we cover in this video, as well as the shooting impressions of the pistol with an optic mounted. If you want all of the general information about the pistol, that's going to be back in part 1, which I'll have a link for, and you should check that out. Also, while you're checking things out, check out the description. There's different ways you can support me. And if you've watched both of these videos, you owe it to me to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. And definitely hit that like button. So moving right along. First, we're going to talk about shooting the gun with an optic. Now, the pistol is incredibly ergonomic, as we've discussed previously. The way that it actually fits in the hand is fantastic. The way your finger falls on the trigger allows for a straight to the rear trigger pull. This is one of the easiest plastic guns I've ever shot. It out of the box this is a hyperbole. Everyone says it in every video, and out of the box it's the best plastic gun or whatever. This particular pistol comes with a very good feel out of the box, and when you actually mount it with an optic, so you take away the pretty cheesy iron sights and use a good dot with a good zero, the gun basically becomes telepathic. The recoil sensation for the gun is pretty minimal. It's pretty typical for a good polymer service pistol. It's not quite as flat as something like a Glock or a CZ P10C, but it's not as flippy as the Sig Sauer P320 or anything like that, but it is very, very manageable. It is a downright pleasure to shoot. And with the dot, I was shooting great with it. It was as if there was no learning curve. I just picked it up, I could grip it and rip it, and pretty much just shred alphas with this thing, no problem. Unfortunately, this is not a game gun, as we discussed in the last video. This is a service gun, but with an optic mounted, I would have absolutely no reservation carrying this or using it as a home defense weapon. And part of the reason that is the optic mounting system, which is pretty brilliant. So I'm going to take it down and show you guys on the table why the optics mounting system is so clever. So as you can see, the way that the optic sits inside the frame is not particularly low. It's as low as you'd see on a lot of the optics cuts that are on the market today that don't really sink it too deep into the slide. So what's going on with this is it's actually a spacer more so than a plate. It's not like the other brands where you're threading screws from the optic down into the plate, and then you have another set of screws holding the plate onto the slide. Rather, the plate is held to the slide and the screws go through the spacer into the slide as well. So you have a carbon steel screw with a carbon steel slide, and that just seems like a good match. Now, the plate itself is actually polymer, which kind of gave me worry at first, but the 500 rounds or so I shot through the thing, I didn't have any issues with losing zero or anything like that. It seems relatively squared away, but I'm not going to be punching any fence posts with this system. And speaking with IWI, they've assured me that they put over 10,000 rounds through their version of the gun and had no issues with losing zero or anything like that. So let's take a closer look. I'm going to actually use my Wheeler Fat Wrench. If you're playing with red dot sights and you don't have one of these, you are wrong. I've got a link in the description. You can check out and get one yourself. So there you have it, guys, with the screws backed out, and you'll notice these are very long screws. These are not the screws that came with my Delta Point Pro. These are screws that actually came with the pistol itself, which is the first I've heard of a pistol company supplying these screws to actually mount the dots to their own pistol, which is awesome. But you can see the pocket in there. It's actually, it reads Delta Point right there on the plate itself. It has 4 recoil bosses or whatever that marry up with the holes on the underside of the optic. The plate itself has a snug fit into the slide. You can actually just lift it straight out, but the plate has zero play with how it is fit to the slide. So it comes right out, and you can see this interesting jigsaw pattern right there. And it's got 2 different sets of holes that screws can go to from the optic, as well as this little post right here, which goes up into the plate itself and kind of holds it on the slide. So that's kind of interesting. It came with that. And as far as the plates that it comes with, so it's going to come with an RMR plate, a Vortex Venom plate, the blank plate that actually goes on the slide when you're not using an optic, which is also polymer, and a Romeo 1 plate. One thing that strikes me as interesting, and I don't know if this is going to be the case or not as far as the company supporting the gun in the aftermarket, but as new optics come out, they could conceivably sell new plates like this, and it would be at a much lower price point than the aluminum and steel offerings from the other manufacturers. So that was kind of interesting. I think this is an interesting concept, and you can see the blank plate cover just kind of goes on like that, and we would screw it down. But you can, I mentioned the screws, and here are what they give you. I mean, they give you a ton of screws to hold your optics in place, and all of them, well, not all of them, the Delta Point Pro screws that they came with and some of these other screws you can see came with the Vibratite already on there, so that was kind of a bonus. So field stripping on the Masada is going to be like just about any other pistol that has a takedown lever. You know, lock the pistol to the rear, pull the takedown lever, pull the trigger, and pull the slide off. With the slide off, you can take out the captive recoil spring, which is actually pretty short. You've got your 4-inch barrel right there, and there is the inside of your slide. On the inside of the slide, all the machining is very clean. There's no chatter marks or anything like that. This is a quality firearm. You'll notice the firing pin plunger, the firing pin block, is actually at the rear of the slide near the lug that interfaces with the fire control unit. So with the pin in the takedown position, you can just kind of wiggle it free and pull it out. It helps if you push pressure down on the fire control unit. Then it just lifts up out. You have to lift by the front rails at first. So with the fire control lifted out, you'll notice that sometimes there's a spring right here. It can sometimes stay with the frame, or it comes out and stays on this little nub on this bar. This doesn't have to stay there. You can pull this spring off pretty easy and put it in the corresponding hole inside the frame when you're reassembling. But right here, what you see, fellas, this is the fire control unit, just like the P320. The serial number is actually stamped on the back there. Now the rails, as you can see, are kind of milled into this chassis, so there are the rails. They're similar in style to a Glock, and you've got your ejector right there that rides on the chassis as well. And inside the frame, there's really nothing. There is a little spring that kind of spring loads the fire control unit and applies sort of upward pressure on it. Not real sure exactly what that's for. The magazine catch does stay inside the frame, and you can see kind of some springs down in there that do whatever that needs to do. And as far as reassembly is concerned, if I take my little spring, I'm going to put it inside this hole inside the frame, as you see there, and just kind of press down on it. That's great. And then you have to start at the rear with the serialized component. Make sure that the trigger is going to clear the frame. And then as you sort of push down into it, that spring is going to slide forward and catch onto the nub on this little bar. Then you can just kind of press the fire control down into the frame. And this little QR code thing right there has a tendency to turn, so you are going to have to make sure that it is aligned with the frame to get it into the frame. And there we go. Now it just presses right in. Then we take our takedown lever and just kind of press it in and kind of wiggle it around until it snaps back into place. There we go. So now the takedown lever is where it needs to be. Reassembly is going to be similar. But before we put the Masada back together again, guys, I want to just show you this real quick. This is the slide from my Glock 17 Gen 4. The slides are very similar in length. The only difference in why you get a 4-inch barrel in the Masada and not a 4.5-inch barrel is Glock barrels sit really far back, and you can just see in the machining with where the barrel hoods come through the barrel that you're getting about a 1/2 inch more of barrel, which is going to equate to some feet per second in velocity and ammo. But anything over 4 inches with a 9mm is going to be enough. That is what all of the 9mm recipe test barrels are shot out of, is 4-inch barrels. So you should get great performance from any of your duty rounds. So I just thought that was interesting and wanted to show you that real quick. So I'm actually going to put this slide plate back on the pistol. This is a T&E pistol, guys, after all, if you didn't catch that in the first video. So this is not my pistol, but that's what it's going to look like with the blank plate attached. So there we go with the blank plate on. As far as actually putting the gun back together, it's going to be like basically every other service 9. The barrel is going to go inside the frame there. The recoil spring is going to have a rounded end and an end with a hole in it. It seems to want to fit with the rounded end forward, and it's just going to snap in just like every other pistol. We're going to put the slide on the frame, lock the slide to the rear, turn the takedown lever up, slide back in battery, and we have a functional pistol. So at this point, guys, you know just about everything I know about the Masada. The Masada is an incredible value. On the internet, these things are going for about $450-ish in late 2019, which is a great deal. It stacks up very nicely against the field of other optics-ready service pistols at a considerably lower price. I think due in part to how they machined the optics plate system. So while it is a good value, there are some negatives, as we discussed in the first video. The iron sights that ship with the gun are not the greatest. They're not my favorite by a long stretch. The gun itself has kind of low texture on it. You're probably going to want to do something to increase the texture, but as it is out of the box, it is still absolutely usable. So the aftermarket for this pistol, as you can imagine from a non-major brand, is not going to be as robust as it is going to be for like a SIG or a Glock or something like that. There are companies making holsters for it, including A&R Designs, and as I've mentioned in the part 1 video, the Safariland GLS holster will fit it, and it's what I used in the B-roll footage. I've got a link for this in the description if you want to check it out. So even with some of those drawbacks, I still think the advantages of this pistol far outweigh those drawbacks. I think the gun, because of the shape, the texture is not as big a deal because geometrically the shape of the gun really welds into your hand and you get a great grip very naturally on the pistol. As far as accessories are concerned, you don't need a bunch of accessories, you just need a few good ones. Since it uses SIG sights, you can already swap the sights for quality sights. Optics are going to fit, are already the major players in the optics game. A&R makes some good holsters, and I'm sure some other folks will open up to them eventually. Now, as far as other performance parts and all that silliness, you saw the trigger pull on this thing's about 4 pounds. You don't need to go any lighter necessarily unless you would want to. I'm sure somebody will come out with a spring kit or something like that to allow you, but the actual trigger itself doesn't need to be changed. The trigger is fantastic. In fact, I wish more guns had triggers that felt as good as this. So if you weren't able to put it together yet, guys, yes, I can absolutely recommend this pistol. It is a fantastic pistol. The ergonomics are great. The shootability is very, very good. The accuracy is very strong. It's got a lot of things going for it. So with all that said, I appreciate you guys watching. Please check out the stuff in the description. Like, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, guys.